The theme of the session is air cargo, a key contributor to sustainability of the air transport industry. The panel consists of the following distinguished executives. We have Mr. Vladimir Zubkov, Secretary General of the International Air Cargo Association, TIACA. We have Mr. Sanjeev Gadhia, CEO of Astral Aviation. And in this panel, Sanjeev will be participating in his capacity as the chairman of AFRA Route Network and Cargo Committee. Our moderator is none other than Mr. John Reji, Editor, Logistics Update Africa. Reji, you have the floor.
Thanks, Maureen, for this opportunity. To thank AFRA for giving me this opportunity to moderate this session. As always, it's an honor for me and my organization, Stat Media Group and Logistic Update Africa, to be part of AFRA Annual General Assembly. The COVID pandemic has made all of us to change the way we function. Had it not been for COVID, all of us would have been in Angola meeting face to face. The times that we are going through are extremely challenging, but the crisis is teaching us many lessons. It will be a wasted opportunity for all of us if we do not learn a thing or two about life and work during this crisis, which appears to be longer than most of us expected. Let me make an attempt to make a few observations about the topic of our discussion, which is air cargo, a key contributor to sustainability of the air transport, which within the overall theme of the AFRA AGA this year, which is redefining air transport for a new era. The COVID pandemic really demonstrated to the world, in fact, for the first time, the importance of air cargo like never before. With the passenger aviation almost to the bare minimum and belly capacity rapidly declining around the world, we saw how air cargo became the lifeline of the world, quite literally, and also the only revenue generating segment for airlines around the world. As per IATA data, Africa contributes less than 2% to the total global air freight market share. However, according to IATA, African airlines saw demand increase by 9.7% year on year in September this year. And this was the 5th consecutive month in which the region posted strongest increase in international demand. Now the question is how to increase Africa's share to the global air freight market, make it globally competitive, and to make it a key factor that will make aviation in Africa sustainable and profitable. To discuss this and much more, I am happy to have two persons who are well known in the industry and who follow the aviation and air cargo trends in Africa and in the world. Both of them are industry colleagues, and I'm happy to note that both of them are very close friends as well. Sanjeev Gadhia joins me from Nairobi, and Vladimir Zubkov joins me from Montreal in Canada. With just under 25 minutes for our discussion, let's immediately get into the discussion, and I just want to get Sanjeev into the discussion and debate. Sanjeev, you're the founder and the CEO of Astral Aviation. Of course, today you join me in this conversation, not as a founder and CEO of Astral Aviation, but as somebody who is the chairman of AFRA Route Network and Cargo Committee. But I think you will draw a lot of your experience and knowledge from the cargo airline that you operate. What measures, initiatives do you recommend to improve the current status of the cooperation and coordination between AFRA member airlines for a better air cargo industry, air cargo sector within Africa? Sanjeev, you're muted.
Microphone.
I beg your pardon. Good afternoon, everyone. And again, it's a pleasure to be taking part in the second day of the AFRA AGA. Yesterday, I participated in the CEO's roundtable, and we had some fantastic interactions. So I actually chaired my first meeting of the Route Network and Cargo Committee in October, which is just a month ago. And the timing of my appointment came at a time when AFRA members were in the midst of the biggest aviation crisis. Hence, my first objective was to enhance the cooperation and coordination between AFRA member airlines by introducing a template which will enable all members to share their winter schedule network, which will form the basis of entering into areas of network cooperation, coordination, and harmonization, as members have recognized that the networks have reduced significantly during the pandemic, and it makes sense to consolidate rather than compete. I've also recommended that members participate in webinars between themselves, which will enable a quicker turnaround compared to before. And I'm very confident, Reji, that during my tenure, I will encourage greater cooperation between members during the pandemic, as this is one of the most important strategies of being resilient and agile during difficult times.
Thanks, Sanjeev, for that initial comments on this particular topic. Let Vladimir into the conversation. Vladimir, you represent the International Air Cargo Association, or the TIACA, and you have been part of a number of deliberations, number of meetings across different stakeholders of the aviation and air cargo within the industry, and cutting across industry association with ICAO, IATA, FIATA. How critical, according to you, is the industry collaboration for the air cargo development in Africa?
Well, first of all, greetings to all the participants, and happy to be here. The international collaboration, these days especially, is the key. And I would say that the best thing which has happened is the formation of a body under the ICAO roof, where all the international organizations are represented, and it gives access to all regional offices of ICAO, plus AFRA and other international organizations which are representing interests of Africa. And together, we are discussing the most important issues which appeared because of COVID, and not only because of this. And as we finish this session, another meeting will be held in ICAO. And you know, to use the analogy, I would like to recall the African saying that the wisdom is like a baobab tree. No one can embrace it alone. So the same with the collaboration in aviation, and especially on cargo. It has to be all working together in order to move forward the African agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Vladimir. Sanjeev, you remember a few years back, there was an ICAO organized air cargo development conference for Africa in Addis, and we all of us were part of that. Today, something that we hear very often, and sometimes we do get tired of, is the word called collaboration. And if you recollect, the conversation in the ICAO conference was that there are a lot of agreements, there are a lot of treaties being signed, a lot of them are actually signed, but then it's not being followed up. When you typically look at the collaboration as the important foundation for air cargo development within Africa, can you tell us in terms of the typical pain points to get some of these collaborative projects really on a start?
Thank you, Reji, and it's a very valid point. I even talked about it yesterday, about the importance of collaboration and cooperation, because this is the time when we need to collaborate more, because we're going through the worst aviation crisis in modern history. And I do remember the event, which was an ICAO event in Ethiopia, where we talked about collaboration and cooperation. But unfortunately, we have a situation in Africa where we talk about things, but there's never any implementation. And sadly, this is the case for collaboration. However, there's one exception, which is the fact that AFRA has actually taken it up as their mandate, as their objective, to encourage cooperation between member airlines. And they've actually created a committee, which is what I'm chairing right now, which is the Route Network Committee, which has been merged with the Cargo Committee. And our simple objective is to make sure that we cooperate and collaborate more And we will actually do it the African way, where we actually do it on a one-to-one basis. Because if you take 8 airlines and you put them in a room and you tell them to start talking about cooperation and collaboration, nothing is going to happen. So what we have to do is we have to do it the traditional way. We have to take each pair of airline together and actually sort of, take the whole process in a very sort of traditional way, and actually now making sure that they look at and identify which are the routes that they can collaborate in. What are the other collaborations that they can actually have on cargo, on MRO, on training? And I believe that this is something that is required, and this is something that is in the process. And what we have done is that we've actually initiated a process of now making sure that we are actually communicating, because one of the key elements of collaboration is communication. It's openness, it's transparency, but above all, it has to be win-win. Because when you have a situation where one airline is losing and one airline is winning, you will never have a level playing field, Reji. And this is something that I want to change with the way we actually discuss about collaboration. And I want to make it a priority that we need to actually make sure that we collaborate more now compared to before.
Win-win proposal and level playing field. I think these are important segments or important elements. I think on which that we can build the collaboration and cooperation. Vladimir, when you listen to Sanjeev, of course, Sanjeev actually represents an Astral Aviation. He has his own interest. That's one part of it. Like him, that everyone in the room would have his own or her own interest. When you represent TIACA or the International Air Cargo Association, and when you're kind of get everyone together, because you represent not any specific airline or a specific airport, you basically represent an industry organization. What are some of the typical challenges that you come across, and how do you intend to solve some of these perennial problems that actually pull down our cooperative movement within the air cargo industry, or collaborative movement within the air cargo industry?
Thank you, Reji. The challenges are perhaps almost permanent. And the first one starts with the recognition of cargo as the engine of the global trade and national economies. If you look at the agenda of many conferences, you can hardly find a cargo session. And I remember Sanjeev and we worked very hard with the AFRA Secretary General, Director General, current and the previous one, to suggest and to make cargo as a part of the agenda. And I'm very happy to acknowledge the great efforts of AFRA in giving cargo its what it deserves. Also, what is important is to catch up with the rest of the aviation. I want to single out the electronic documentation, which today is, I would say, lagging behind the passenger side by 10, 15, maybe even more years. And the reason is, again, not enough attention, and not only conferences I'm talking about, but the boards of the airlines, airports, and other members of the air cargo supply chain. So this is what I view as key steps to be taken. And also, what is important is training. The knowledge about cargo, its importance and its issues, unfortunately, it's very low, especially amongst the decision makers. And this is where we are concentrating our efforts. I'm not only identifying the issues, but I'm now talking about the steps. Together with the several organizations, including ICAO, we have developed training course for senior people in the civil aviation administrations on the cargo. And we are promoting the benefits of air cargo through our channels. And you are, by the way, helping us a lot through the media, which you control. So I would say that the efforts are to continue to handle these challenges, and we are doing this together, like Sanjeev suggested, in collaborative way.
Vladimir, just a follow-up question before I go to Sanjeev. I know that you are so actively involved in the TIACA activities, and I think one of your primary responsibilities also to kind of get the coordination, get the industry collaboration running with the different organizations, IATA, FIATA, TIACA, and ICAO, for example. Can you give us an example or two in terms of some of the specific initiatives that has been rolled out and what has been the response? I know there has been something with ICAO some time back. If you can give me a couple of specific examples of this industry collaboration that you are actually heading in TIACA.
Thank you, Reji. In fact, indeed, we put a lot of emphasis on the industry collaboration. And because of this, I recently transitioned to the position for coordination of the industry collaboration. One of the key places where we do things together is Montreal, under the auspices of ICAO. And since you're asking about concrete examples, I will tell you about one area which is of great importance to Africa, obviously to other regions as well. And this is the digitalization of the air cargo movement. It started indeed as a part of collaborative effort. The ACI presented their project on the contactless movement of passengers. And we, on behalf of TIACA, suggested the contactless movement of cargo. And why it is important. Today, when cargo is moving through the chain, there are a lot of contacts. And it's contacts physical, but also, most importantly, contacts through the paper. And to eliminate this or to reduce this, we need to implement digitalization. And what prompted us is the COVID situation. But where we are heading into the greater efficiency, we are heading into the modernization of the air cargo supply chain. Another example would be the health corridors. And this is where we are trying to facilitate the movement of the crew at different airports. And the objective is to make the rules consistent in application to the crews and other players in the air cargo delivery in order to make it efficient. Just two examples. I can continue, but I think that time will not permit.
Thanks, Vladimir. I think we would like to hear more of such examples, and I do believe that you will be pursuing some of these examples or some of these projects under your current responsibility at TIACA. Sanjeev, coming to COVID, COVID has really made us the kind of champions and made our voice a little more visible and audible to the rest of the aviation industry. What, according to you, are some of the positive things that happened for the air freight industry in the last 8 months, when we saw that the passenger aviation has come almost to a standstill, belly capacity is almost disappeared. Air cargo became the lifeline of the world. How do you look at the last 8 months, and do you think that today, not you, maybe the Ethiopians and Kenyans and South African Airlines cargo division heads, do they have a much stronger muscle power, and their voices heard much better?
Very well said, Reji. As cargo operations have been a lifesaver for all the airlines, not only in Africa, but across the world. And the importance of air cargo has been neglected by many African airlines, which unfortunately did not invest in wide-body freighters. And also, infrastructure is also very important. And what we have seen is a situation where in many airports in Africa today, there's very little infrastructure to support the movement of cargo. Now, the pandemic has been a wake-up call, and there has been a need to treat cargo as core business. And one of the things I actually mentioned and I spoke about yesterday was to actually request the aviation industry to give cargo a priority and to enable the voice of cargo to be heard whenever we are talking about strategy, about fleet planning, about network development. But the most important thing is that cargo has to be represented at the board level. And this is a big problem that we see in many boards of African airlines. You've got governments, you've got people from the public sector, the private sector, but there's nobody from cargo. And when you look at what impact cargo has actually made in the aviation industry in the last 8 months, it's been significant. And I'm quite sure that the best way to actually make sure that cargo is heard is to actually keep it at the board level. Now, the future is very bright for air cargo operations, especially over the next 2 years. But it's very important for the industry to realize that priority has to be given for the transportation of COVID-related medical items. And I'm not only talking about the PPEs and the ventilators and the testing kits, but what I'm talking about is the vaccines, which is something that is scheduled to come out in the first quarter of 2021. And in addition to that, I also see that there will be an increase in demand for e-commerce shipments. And this is something that we've actually neglected in Africa because we always feel that e-commerce will never come to Africa, but it's actually coming into Africa. We're already seeing large e-commerce shipments moving on our 747s, for example, to Lagos and Accra, also into Nairobi. So we need to get ready because the pandemic is actually going to result in a sharp increase in e-commerce shipments. And the problem that we have is that the airlines are not ready, the airports are not ready, we do not have enough infrastructure, not only to support temperature control pharma or vaccines, but also with e-commerce cargo, because you cannot just put e-commerce cargo in a general cargo warehouse and expect it to be treated the same way. You need to actually make sure that you have the right people, you've got the right technology in terms of software, and you need to have the right processes to actually make sure that e-commerce cargo, and for that same matter, pharma, does not stay in the warehouse for more than 24 hours. So this is something that we really need to accept, that this is a reality for our business for the next 2 years. And we have to actually make sure that there is sufficient investment in terms of human resources and also in terms of our capacity building so that we can actually be able to handle both the COVID-related items and also the e-commerce items, because this is really what we're going to be seeing for the next 2 years.
Sanjeev, just want a follow-up question on this. Do you think the last 8 months was actually an kind of laboratory that a lot of experiments were done? Probably a lot of the airlines would have actually kind of done the experiment maybe 3 years from the down or 5 years from the down. Probably that this was like a blessing in disguise. People began to kind of order online, and you need a delivery mechanism. All of a sudden, you found there is a lot of cargo coming into from the online orders to be delivered, for example. So, did a lot of the air freight industry experiment a lot of things in the last 8 months, and probably they have launched or kickstarted a lot of projects in the last 8 months?
Well, to a certain extent, what you say is very true, because the biggest experiment that took place in the aviation industry is to transport cargo on passenger seats. And this is something that never was imagined, and it was never forecasted. We always looked at the passenger airlines always looked at cargo as ancillary income. Cargo travels on the belly, passengers travel in the main deck. But for the first time, there was a reality check, and it was through innovation that we actually saw airlines now accepting cargo. You've got some of the best aircrafts, the A350, to the Dreamliners, to the 777s, which were adopted to carrying cargo on the seats. But then something interesting happened after that. They actually removed the seats. And that was also fantastic because that gave them better volume. But the biggest drawback is that you can never replace the cargo door of a passenger. You can never replace the door of an aircraft with a cargo door. That really needs an extensive modification. So airlines have really been very innovative. They've had the support of Boeing and Airbus to make the changes. But the most important thing to remember is to carry cargo on a passenger aircraft, or what we call freighters, is a temporary solution. What we really need is investments have to be made in acquiring dedicated cargo aircrafts, because the whole process of loading, unloading, can take a very, very long period of time. So coming back to the experimentation, the airports have learned a lot. The ground handlers have learned a lot. They've actually learned how to handle a 777 coming with 45 tons of cargo, and they've got to increase the manpower. The other thing which we have learned a lot, which is very important, Reji, to mention, is we've learned that we do not need to be in the office to run an airline. We can actually be able to work virtually, and we can actually make sure that our teams are also able to have the same level of efficiency by not coming to the office. And I really believe that this is the bigger experiment. And traditionally, we've always come to the fact that to run a cargo business, you need to be in the office. And I think it's also true to a certain extent for ground operations. But when you're looking at the main decision making which takes place, load planning, sales, marketing, and bookings can actually be done virtually. And that I really believe has been a lesson to be learned, because we are not really out of COVID yet. We're in the second cycle, and there could be a possibility that some of us may need to go back home and to run our respective airlines. And I believe that since we've already had an experiment many, many months ago, I'm very, very confident that besides my organization, there are many airlines today which can be able to operate from working from home, or virtually for that matter.
Who actually thought last year in Mauritius that in 2020 and this month here that we would sit and do the AFRA AGA like this? And who did think that A350, the beautiful aircraft like A350, 777 would have cargo on the seats for exam instead of the people? We always had the cargo just below our foot. With that, we have, I think, the last 5 minutes. We started a bit late. We have the last 5 minutes. I just want to get Vladimir to an important topic of the discussion, which is related to the single African air transport market and the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. These are continental free trade agreement. These are bilateral and trilateral agreement between countries to help the aviation industry and air cargo industry. Vladimir, how do you align some of your industry collaboration with some of these initiatives, projects by the African Union or from different countries within Africa?
Reji, I think that all this comes down to the liberalization of the markets. And we in TIACA are very strong on promoting the liberalization. And why it's important to Africa, I think that if you look at the just priority action clusters which exist in the proposed free trade agreement, it's facilitation, it's trade policy, it's productive capacity, it's trade-related infrastructure. Look at the infrastructure. We are lagging behind again the passenger side, and the trade facilitation agreement is promoting all what is important for aviation. It's unfortunate that the actual operational phase is put off, but in a way it gives time to consolidate and to move forward. And the same with the single market, a single African air transport market agreement. As long as I'm working in Africa, we're talking about this agreement. The benefits are obvious: jobs, boost traffic, driving economy, and we, together with IATA and other organizations, especially based in Africa, we are promoting the benefits. Look at the two conferences devoted to the air cargo which were held in Africa. It was lots about the importance of these two instruments. So we will continue explaining the need for Africa to start working according to these two major instruments.
Thanks, Vladimir. Sanjeev, I just want to get you the closing comment, and I would want you to believe that all of us keep saying that cargo doesn't talk, which is a fact, because cargo is not a human being. It does not talk, it doesn't tweet. But having said that, today we see that a lot of the people are aware of what the role the air cargo plays. For example, they know what the freight is, how the freighters operate, and with the arrival of the potential COVID vaccine, maybe early next year, you would see the utilization of freighters and air cargo industry much more in terms of the distribution of the vaccines for COVID. What would be some of the things that you would like to see changed maybe next year when we I hope that we may not do a virtual AFRA AGA. What would be some of the things that you would like to see changed strategically for the cargo sector, and what would be some of the things that you would want to see at the board level in terms of the role that cargo would have in the combination carriers?
Thank you, Reji. Very relevant question. The transportation of the vaccines is going to be the single largest and most complex logistics exercise in the world, because we've actually been informed that the transportation of vaccines would actually take the equivalent of 8,000 Boeing 747 flights. And when I look at what is going to come into Africa, which is the first part of the vaccines, which will be 20% under the COVAX program, which will be implemented by the Vaccine Alliance, we actually see that 200 million single doses of vaccines are going to come into Africa. And what we see is a very big challenge, that there are only 3 airports in Africa which can actually be able to handle the transshipment and storage of vaccines. And these are Nairobi, Johannesburg, and Addis Ababa. So what we have is a situation where every country in Africa has to have the vaccines. We have to actually have a combination of direct flights and flights via the respective hub. But the most important thing is that no one airline in the world can be able to transport the COVID vaccine. It has to be a collaborative approach. It has to be a collaborative approach which has to start between the airlines and the airports, the airlines, the airports, and the ground handlers. And this is something which is very important. So we need a global collaborative strategy to actually handle the transshipment of the vaccines. The second thing which is also very important is to look at innovation as a way of trying to ensure that the supply chain for the vaccine is not fractured in a way in which it will compromise the quality of the vaccine. So we have to look at last mile delivery solutions. We have to look at the possibility of using advanced packaging materials which can keep the life of the vaccine as long as possible. We would actually have to also look at drones as a tool for last mile delivery to reach remote locations in rural areas with the vaccine, so that the traditional forms of transportation, whether it is by road or whether it is by motorbike or in any other form of transport, that we actually have a shorter transit period of time. Because when it comes to vaccines, we're talking about human life, and we cannot compromise human life at any cost. So we have to actually make sure that the supply chain is strengthened, and we have to actually make sure that everybody in the supply chain has to work in a collaborative manner to make sure that this big task of transporting and distributing the vaccines in Africa is actually met, because we have a responsibility towards the African nation, and we have to actually make sure that we carry out that responsibility in a professional and in a responsible manner.
Thanks, Sanjeev. Vladimir, let me just get you in for your last closing comment. How confident are you with the COVID-19 crisis not behind us? We are still dealing with it. Collaboration become a priority for industry organization and for the airline industry and for the air cargo industry in general, or aviation industry in general within Africa. How critical will collaboration be?
It's absolutely critical, and collaboration to me is not just a slogan. It's using the best in other organizations or regions and bringing it to Africa. And I mentioned digitalization. We, through the ICAO Latin American office, organized a splendid event, a webinar on digitalization. Now, we are promoting it for the same in Africa, and the African regional directors are collaborating with this. So working together, to me, means taking concrete steps. And if something is good done elsewhere, it has to be brought to Africa as well. And one excellent example of collaborative effort was yesterday when Sanjeev, to other members of the board, and I talked to the ICAO Air Navigation Commission, which consists of representatives from many countries, and several of them are from Africa. So they also got the bug of collaboration with within the framework of TIACA, and they will help us to promote collaborative effort here and bring innovative approaches to Africa. I think that this is what is key in the COVID situation and after.
Thanks, Vladimir. Actually, that brings us to the end of this conversation. I'd like to wrap up here with one word that let the conversation go on. Cargo is very critical to global trade, and we have seen it. COVID has just proved that. Let cargo, air cargo, get much more priority at the board level across all airlines. I'd like to thank Vladimir and Sanjeev for joining this panel discussion. I'd like to thank also AFRA. Let's back to Maureen.
Thank you very much, Reji, for your wonderful moderation of the session. And thank you very much to our panelists, Vladimir and Sanjeev, for tackling the subject at hand on cargo. We've gotten insights on collaboration for air cargo development in Africa. We've also gotten information on the impacts and lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic on the air cargo industry. From the panel, we've also noted recommendations from the panelists on how to improve the current status of cooperation and coordination between AFRA member airlines for a better efficiency of the air cargo activity within Africa and beyond. And we also have received some recommendations to the industry on actions to be taken to improve cargo operational efficiency. Thank you very much.